I'm taking my mistress instead. I sold her house before they returned. That morning, I was folding Richard's shirts when my phone buzzed on the mahogany dresser. Soft sunlight filtered through the cream silk curtains, filling our bedroom with a warm glow I used to love. After 25 years of marriage, I still took pride in keeping everything perfect for him. The shirts were crisp and warm from the iron. I placed them carefully into a suitcase. We were supposed to leave for the Maldives in 3 hours. Our second honeymoon, Richard had called it. After months of late nights and emotional distance, I believed this trip might fix us. I had planned everything. The resort, the dinners, his favorite cologne. I even bought new lingerie, even though at 55 it made me feel foolish. Still, I hoped. My phone buzzed again. Richard's name appeared, and my heart skipped, the way it always had. I opened the message, expecting something simple. Instead, I read, "Don't go to the airport. I'm taking Jessica to the Maldives instead. She deserves this vacation more than you." I read it again. And again. The words didn't change. Jessica. His 29-year-old secretary. The one who'd started 6 months ago. My legs gave out, and I sat on the bed, still holding his shirt. My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor, but I didn't hear it. All I could hear was my heartbeat pounding in my ears. She deserves this vacation more than you. More than me. The woman who supported him for 25 years. The woman who gave up her architecture career. The woman who made his life easy, smooth, invisible. I looked around the bedroom. Everything was exactly how I kept it. The vanity where I hid my exhaustion with makeup. The closet where my clothes were perfectly organized, while his side was chaos because he knew I'd clean it. The photos on the nightstand told the story of our life. Our wedding day. Me at 30, believing in forever. Richard handsome and confident, promising love. Anniversary photos where I stood just behind him, smiling while he took center stage. In every photo, I looked smaller. When had I become so invisible? I picked up my phone. I could have called him. Begged. Asked why. But I already knew the answers. I wasn't young. I wasn't exciting. Jessica was. How long had this been going on? How many late nights were lies? How many times had I waited with dinner while he was with her? I stood up slowly. His suitcase lay open on the bed, half packed for a trip I wouldn't take. I imagined Jessica wearing the dresses I was too afraid to buy, sitting at the restaurant I reserved, touching the man who once treated me like I mattered. The worst part wasn't the affair. It was the way he did it. A text message. No call. No apology. Just a message, as if canceling a meeting. I went to the vanity and looked at myself. 55 years old. Polished. Tired. Elegant, but forgotten. My phone buzzed again. Tell the housekeeper not to come this week. We'll be gone until Sunday. That's when something inside me changed. For 25 years, I had been perfect. I gave up my independence, my career, my voice. I made his life so comfortable that he forgot I existed. I went to my jewelry box and opened the hidden compartment beneath my mother's pearls. Inside was a bank statement he'd never seen. $800,000. An inheritance from my father, invested quietly 5 years earlier. Richard controlled our finances, gave me an allowance, treated me like a dependent. He never knew I kept something for myself. I told myself it was just security. I was wrong. It was freedom. I looked at the suitcase one last time. Then I unpacked it completely. If Richard wanted my life, he was about to learn what it actually cost. I deleted his messages without replying. That woman folding shirts that morning no longer existed. Later, I sat in the kitchen staring at cold coffee. The house felt heavy. Every room held memories I once romanticized. This kitchen, where I cooked meals he barely noticed. The countertops I chose for him. The appliances I dreamed would impress his colleagues. I remembered my architecture firm. The excitement I once had. How my stories slowly disappeared because his work always mattered more. First, I missed meetings. Then deadlines. Then my career. Within 5 years, it was gone. That afternoon, I called a realtor. I sold the penthouse for cash. When Richard and Jessica returned from the Maldives, bronzed and smiling, the house was empty. So was his life. "You don't need that stress," he'd said, stroking my hair while I cried over the contracts I was giving up. "I make enough for both of us. Focus on making our home beautiful. Support my career. That matters more than any building you could design." I believed him. I even felt grateful. I thought he was protecting me. What I didn't understand was that he wasn't supporting me. He was taking away my independence. Every client I turned down, every project I walked away from, every year that passed without my name on a building made me smaller in his eyes. The irony hurts now. While I gave up my career to support his, Richard built his success on the stability I provided. He could work late, travel anytime, take big cases because he knew I handled everything else. The house, the social events, the details that made his life easy. I walked into his home office, a room I usually avoided. The leather chairs smelled like his cologne and whiskey. His computer was still on, his email open. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The emails between Richard and Jessica went back months. At first, they were professional, then flirtatious, then deeply personal. Reading them felt like watching my marriage fall apart in slow motion. "Working late again tonight. Margaret won't notice. She's usually asleep by 10. Can't wait to take you somewhere beautiful. You deserve the world."
She's not like you, Jess.
"She's predictable. Domestic. You make me feel alive." Each message hurt, but what hurt more was the pattern. Richard had been slowly rewriting our marriage in his own mind, turning me into the problem. I wasn't exciting. I wasn't young. I wasn't enough. I scrolled further back. Other names appeared. Sarah, a paralegal. Before her, Amanda from accounting. Different women, same story. He lost interest when they wanted more. When the fantasy ended, my hands shook as I closed the laptop. This wasn't about Jessica. This was who Richard had always been. For years, I thought I had failed him, that I needed to be better, prettier, more interesting. The truth was simpler. Richard loved the chase, not the person. He was incapable of real love. I went upstairs and opened my jewelry box. Beneath my mother's pearls was the bank statement, and under that, a letter from my father. I hadn't read it since he died. "My darling Margaret," it began. "I worry about you in that marriage. Richard is charming, but charm isn't love. Love doesn't ask you to shrink so someone else can feel big. You were raised to build things, to take up space. Don't let anyone convince you to disappear." My father had seen what I refused to see. He left me that money not just as inheritance, but as a way out. His note ended simply, "For when you remember who you are." Standing in the bedroom where I'd felt like a guest in my own life, I finally understood. Richard hadn't married me for love. He married me because I was useful, young enough to impress, ambitious enough to support him, flexible enough to shape. For 25 years, I tried to earn his love. I exercised, changed my appearance, learned his interests, stopped sharing my opinions. Every criticism chipped away at me, and I helped him do it. But not everything was gone. Buried deep was the woman my father raised. The woman who built a successful architecture firm before she was 30. The woman who designed buildings that still stood. I looked out the window at the perfect houses on our street. How many women inside them were living my life? How many had given up everything for men who saw them as accessories? "She deserves this vacation more than you." That sentence echoed in my mind. The cruelty. The entitlement. The way I'd been replaced so easily. Something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to compete. I wasn't going to prove my worth to a man who couldn't see it. For the first time in decades, I chose myself. I opened my laptop and began researching how to liquidate assets quickly. How to disappear. The house. The accounts. The life we built. Papers soon covered the kitchen table.
Deeds.
Insurance. Bank records. Documents Richard always handled while I focused on being the perfect wife. Then I saw it. The house was in my name. I read the deed 3 times. Years ago, Richard's credit had taken a hit, and his lawyer suggested putting the house under my name temporarily. We never changed it. For 20 years, I believed the house was ours. Legally, it was mine. Richard had been so sure of his control that he never noticed, and I was done being invisible. I stood in the empty living room, staring at the sunlight streaming through the tall windows, imagining Richard and Jessica returning from their vacation. The thought of them stepping into my home, laughing, bronzed and happy, made my pulse quicken, not with fear, but with the sharp satisfaction of knowing they would find it empty. Every carefully chosen detail, every piece of furniture, every photograph of us that once symbolized a life I thought I wanted had been swept aside by the reality that the life I thought I shared with him had always been mine to control. I poured myself a cup of coffee, watching the steam curl into the air like a silent victory. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, and the soft creak of the hardwood floor beneath my feet. It felt strange at first, walking around and touching things without seeking approval, without measuring how Richard would react. I touched the marble countertops in the kitchen, the ones I had agonized over picking to match his tastes. For decades, I had let his preferences shape my world. Now I realized the marble, the appliances, the chairs, even the walls, they were all mine. I moved through the house with a strange lightness, as though stepping into a new skin. Each room reminded me of sacrifices I had made. The home office, where I had logged hours of unpaid labor supporting his career. The dining room, where I hosted colleagues' wives and feigned interest in conversations about cases I didn't care about. The bedroom, where I had folded his shirts, arranged his suitcases, and convinced myself that planning every detail of our trips would somehow earn his love. But none of that had mattered to him. He never saw me, not truly. I went upstairs and looked at my wardrobe. For years, I had dressed not for myself, but for him. Muted colors, modest cuts, clothes that made me acceptable, not memorable. But today, the wardrobe felt different. Not because I would wear something extravagant, but because it was finally my choice. I could wear whatever I wanted for me. It was the simplest kind of rebellion, but the most profound, reclaiming the right to exist on my own terms. The bank statement on my desk reminded me of the real power I now held. $800,000, money Richard had no idea existed. Money that could take me anywhere, start over, rebuild anything I wanted. He had treated me like a dependent all these years, controlling every credit card, every financial move, every decision that might remind me I could live independently. And now, with one decision, I could walk away from all of it. The marriage, the resentment, the suffocating expectations. I remembered the letter from my father again. His words were no longer a ghost haunting me. They were a map. Don't let anyone convince you you're meant to be invisible. He had seen my potential when I could not. He had left me the means to reclaim it. And now I had no excuses left. I spent the next few hours meticulously organizing everything. The realtor I called confirmed the sale could be finalized within days. All of the documents, signatures, and transfers were ready for a single, decisive act. I was methodical, precise, almost reverent. This wasn't just a financial transaction. It was the reclamation of my life. As the sun began to dip, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, I packed a single suitcase. Not for Richard, not for Jessica, not for anyone else. For me, clothes that fit my style, my comfort, my identity. I included only what I truly needed, a few essentials, a pair of shoes I loved, my mother's pearls, and a notebook to capture the life I was about to build. The rest of the house, my curated perfection, the rooms that had been my cage, would belong to someone else. Richard would walk into a beautiful home, empty of me, and understand nothing about who I truly was. I paused before leaving the master bedroom, touching the mahogany dresser where my phone had buzzed with betrayal. I could almost hear his voice, the casual cruelty of that message replaying in my mind. She deserves this vacation more than you. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt or desperate. I felt a quiet fury and clarity. He had assumed he could replace me. He had underestimated my understanding of my own worth. Stepping outside, The neighborhood seemed unchanged. The lawns were perfectly trimmed, cars gleaming in the fading light, neighbors strolling with polite smiles. And yet, everything felt smaller, staged, artificial. I realized my entire life with Richard had been a stage set, designed to showcase him, not to reflect who I was. I walked down the street, suitcase in hand, and for the first time, I felt the enormity of space around me, the freedom I had been denied for decades. I called a cab to take me to the airport, each step deliberate. With every click of my heels on the sidewalk, I imagined shedding layers of doubt, regret, and submission. By the time I reached the car, I felt untethered, not reckless, but resolutely alive. Richard had controlled our life together, shaping me into someone he wanted. But he had forgotten one thing. I had built myself, and I had always had the power to undo him. During the ride, I reflected on the years I had spent bending, compromising, and reshaping my identity for someone incapable of genuine love. And yet, there was no bitterness, only a profound understanding. I wasn't leaving because of revenge. I wasn't leaving to hurt Richard or Jessica. I was leaving because I had finally remembered myself. I was leaving to exist fully, unapologetically, without someone else's approval. At the airport, I checked in for the first flight that would take me far from the life that had been so carefully controlled. The terminal buzzed with people rushing to departures, clattering luggage, and announcements echoing through the space. Amid the chaos, I felt a rare stillness. This was my moment, my decision, my future. I was not waiting for Richard to notice me, to apologize, or to understand. I was acting on my own behalf. The plane took off as the city below shrank into a patchwork of streets and buildings. I looked out the window, feeling a strange mixture of liberation and anticipation. For 25 years, I had lived a life dictated by another person's desires and expectations. Now I was moving toward a life dictated only by my own. Every mile upward, every cloud we passed, felt like a shedding of an old self, a quiet celebration of the woman I had fought so long to remember. By the time the sun set completely, the darkness outside mirrored a new beginning inside. I wasn't rushing into something unknown. I was stepping into a life I had chosen. A life where my ambitions mattered, my desires mattered, and my existence was no longer negotiable. Richard would return to a house that he assumed was his, to a life that he assumed would remain unchanged. He would discover, too late, that the foundation he relied on for his success, the woman who had made him unstoppable, had reclaimed herself. And as the city lights faded below and the plane climbed higher, I let myself feel something I hadn't allowed in decades. Joy. Not the fleeting happiness of approval or love, not the artificial glow of being noticed, but the deep, solid joy of self-possession. I had survived the erasure, the betrayal, and the years of careful shaping. I had remembered who I was, and now I was free to become even more than I had ever been. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The life I left behind, the house, the husband, the betrayal, had all served their purpose. What mattered now was the life ahead, untamed and unclaimed by anyone but me. For the first time in decades, I could see the horizon not as a boundary, but as a promise. The plane crossed the clouds, and in the quiet hum of the engines, I imagined the possibilities. Cities to explore, ideas to pursue, dreams to revive. Every decision from here forward would be mine. Every moment would belong to me. And finally, I was ready to live, fully, bravely, and without compromise. No more folding shirts. No more waiting. No more shrinking. I was Margaret again, the woman my father had raised, the architect of my own destiny, and the master of a life Richard had never truly understood. And that realization, more than money, more than distance, more than revenge, was everything that I woke the next morning in a small, quiet hotel far from the city I had called home. For the first time in decades, I slept without hearing the faint creak of Richard's footsteps or the tick of clocks measuring my worth in chores and attention. I stretched and sat on the edge of the bed, noticing how different it felt to exist for myself alone, and no one's expectations pressing on my shoulders, no one's approval required. I poured coffee into a chipped mug I had bought at a small cafe nearby, its imperfections somehow perfect for me. The aroma wrapped around me like a warm cloak, familiar and comforting. I took a slow sip, savoring the taste and the freedom it symbolized. Every morning from now on would be like this, slow, deliberate, and mine. I began to plan my day, not a day tailored for Richard or anyone else, but for me. I walked through the small streets around the hotel, feeling the freedom of my own steps, unmeasured by anyone else. Cafes, bookstores,